What is going on, Panthers Nation? Carolina Dad here. We're going to give it just another minute or two. I thought we could give a live show tonight, give an update around training camp. No, I was not there. I did get to listen to all the pressers. I've seen tons of video footage, photos, stat lines, all kinds of updates being shared. Thought it'd be a good time to jump on here and talk about it. And then pairing into that, I was on ESPN Wilmington earlier today. And there were a few questions from my conversation with Randy Slack that, if time allows, I was like, you know what? It wouldn't be bad to talk through those. Hope everyone is doing well today. I will say, as we let folks join, or as folks are tuning into this show, I am trying to figure out a more consistent schedule to go live because I know, these live shows are important on top of the normal podcast work. I don't know what that's going to look like yet. I think in season, likely a post game reaction live show. All games are on Sunday. So a Sunday night live show. Since we do not have primetime games, I think that is where my head is right now, but still trying to decide. I've also contemplated doing an early morning live stream, possibly. I mean, it'd be very early. Like, I don't think many people will tune in at whatever's 5 or 6 in the morning if I choose to do it then. But I do think it could be a viable option for me to get out more content as the season comes around because there's going to be a lot to keep up with. Pretty busy day for day one of training camp here in the Carolinas. Hey, I will say this, I'm a big fan and always have been a big fan of training camp in Spartanburg. I always say that though, and folks that follow the show know that I have in-laws that live there. So that's part of my reasoning. I was only 5 minutes from Wofford, so it was very easy for us to make the trip down there and then go to camp. But with everything being moved to Uptown, it feels like a pretty successful, I mean, it's only day one, but a pretty successful move for the Carolina Panthers. And I know next year, hopefully, the construction of the facilities around there, I know they'll have the indoor practice facility. They'll have likely a better seating layout with some of the additions that they're going to be making there. So it looks good. I did see some folks that are in the VIP section, which the bleachers are a little more steep on that side, a little bit higher view. I saw them. I saw a bunch of people getting autographs, which is nice. A lot of fan engagement. It looks like the general admission section had a ton of folks in it as well, from what we could see in the videos and everything that was reported. But it was day one. Dave Canales addressed the fan base. Again, you can go out and look at the clip. I don't know if the Panthers posted it. I believe they did. If not, I know there was several other folks down there covering it. We got a clip of Dave Canales addressing the fan base, it's cool in my opinion. I was here for the Matt Rule, or I went to one training camp with Matt Rule. He didn't really engage, at least while I was there, with any of the fans. Last year, Frank Reich was a little bit nicer. Like, Frank came over, said hello to fans. I think he may have signed an autograph or two. I feel like Dave Canales is just going to be a little bit different. I'm not saying he's going out and signing autographs, but at least, like, from an engagement standpoint, looks to be a lot better than what we've seen. So there's a lot of positives. Number one, before I get too deep into training camp talk and what we've heard today, I've got 2 episodes dropping. Number one tonight with Keg of the Panthers Magpie channel. Fantastic follow. If you are not on X or you don't know about him, he's a really good follow, and he's based in the UK. So it's really cool. One, awesome accent, of course. Y'all talk about Xavier having an awesome accent, Keg, awesome accent, bringing him in, hearing about his fandom, how he chose the Carolina Panthers, being over in the UK. So it was a fun episode. And he also, from a content creation standpoint, if you're looking for a good follow on Instagram as well, he puts out lots of things for the Panthers, doing a countdown with a bunch, the players. players' numbers, which is cool to see. But we got that episode. We got another episode coming later this week. I was thinking about doing it tomorrow. I'll probably push it out on Friday, maybe Saturday, with an interview with Cassidy Hill of Panthers.com. That was a fun episode for a lot of reasons. One, for me personally, just hearing about her journey, going to or being a fan of Auburn, going to Alabama, and then covering the Florida Gators. But she was around Trevor Lawrence in his rookie season in Jacksonville. She got to see that up close and personal. And we get to talk about the parallels between Trevor Lawrence and Bryce Young. And it's great to just hear the first hand experience of someone who's been there and seen it. She was with Green Bay for part of last year, in which she was there for a little bit longer, a year and a half, 2 years almost. But with Green Bay, her time around Aaron Rodgers, and of course her time with Jordan Love, as we think about a developing, rising quarterback in the league. So it's a fun segment. We dive into Bryce Young. She's doing a fantastic piece. You can go out on Panthers.com again, look up her work, but she's doing a piece really around the development of Bryce Young that's gone into this season. And she's talked about how tactical Dave Canales has been with implementing a plan for Bryce Young. So this isn't like speculation far away. Like, she is there in the building, works for the Panthers, has seen it, has probably seen things that other folks outside of there have not seen. And you get to hear it personally. So I'm excited for this. So that episode, like I said, probably Friday or Saturday. I'm not going to spoil too much of it because it was a fun episode. I even got to ask about center, got to get an inside scoop on Austin Corbett. How has he looked? What are the struggles that he's gone through? So if you're looking for like a deep dive in Panthers knowledge, that's a really good episode. And I hope y'all realize that as this show grows, you're going to get more and more opportunities for those inside scoops, that inside knowledge for folks that are there covering the team on a daily basis. And folks, it's been fun to this point. We're going to continue to push, and I'm going to continue to push. So your support of this show helps it continue to grow. Another wild thing, man, is I go just rambling on, and we'll get back to camp in a second. I got this notification the other day in my email related to the podcast, and it was like, hey, you are, I don't know, at that time, I think it was like top 30, maybe it was maybe top 40. Your podcast is a top 40 podcast in the football category, and football is soccer and American football in Brazil. I was like, what? What does this even mean? So I like go out and sure enough check like the data and the stuff that they sent me. And I don't follow this. Like, I get into I talk about subscribers. That's important. The actual podcast, which was the foundation of what I do, is one episode per week. You can get it on Apple. You can get it on Spotify. All those things that go with it. I don't promote it. Like, it's part of what I do, and I upload the videos to YouTube. You see those podcasts if you watch the show. I don't really promote my episodes anymore. Like, outside of just, as things go, I naturally just let the things flow. I probably could do a better job of promoting things as they go out. But it was wild. I went and looked, and it was sure enough, like, the podcast itself was I think it peaked at like number 32. It's fallen off a little bit. Like, if you go out and check it now, I think it might be like top 100 in the football podcast. But this is a big group, folks. This is like your Bussin' with the Boys podcast. This is your Fox Sports. This is your New Heights with Travis Kelce, Jason Kelce. All those podcasts fall in that category of football podcasts. And mine somehow with Carolina Panthers in Brazil was among that group, which is freaking mind-blowing for me as a average Joe. And I don't know what's happened in Brazil. Well, I mean, I know that they've got the game coming there, but I don't know what's happened with Brazil and Panthers fandom to have people latching on to the show like that internationally. And then I like for, just to go and craps and giggles, because I don't cuss on the show. Podcast breakdown internationally, the US is like 94% of my plays. Then it's Germany at 2%, the UK at 2%. So then I checked both of those and I was like, oh, maybe I cracked those lists. No. So it's weird. I'm not even in the top 200 or so football podcasts in Germany or the UK, but I somehow cracked the top 100 in Brazil. I also checked out, who was it? Canada, Mexico, Ireland, Australia, I think are the other like big ones. Other crazy thing is like podcast has been listened to, maybe not consistently, but at some point, like 34 countries internationally. It's wild stuff, man. So, anyways, I'll get back on track talking some Panthers talk here today. Hey, so first day of practice in the books, like I said, was not there. So I'm relying on what I see. And number one, I appreciate a ton of the folks that are there in person. I know that you got fans. Fans do a great job of posting, but we've got our beat writers, our reporters that are giving you coverage. We we have our content creators. There's a big group of content creators out there that do a great job of showing, hey, this is what we're seeing. These are the plays. It's impossible for me to try to summarize everything that I saw coming across the feed because there was a bunch of good stuff. But we'll dive into some of the highlights. But yeah, going back to training camp being moved from Spartanburg up to Charlotte seems like pretty successful. We've got the, I don't know if you want to call it, icebox trailer tank, which is pretty cool. Covered seating, man. Covered seating and shade are so important. If you ever went to Spartanburg, number one, Spartanburg is just burning up, blazing hot heat. Spartanburg did have accommodations. I think for a select group, probably VIPs, they had shading on the hill at the very top, but I never know like how you got into that. I didn't have it. But outside of that, you are exposed. Like there are probably like what one or two trees off to the side on the field where they warm up that you could maybe get under. Maybe the end zone section, there's a little bit of shade, but you can't really get a good vantage point of watching. So you are out in the blazing hot heat for 2.5 hours, and you're just sitting there. Think about the players that are in this. You're scorched. You can bring an umbrella, which I know a lot of folks did, but you sit there and get toasted. This time, though, we have covered seating on both sides, which I do think is a really nice feature. And from what I could see from the things that were posted, was really nice. Number three, I guess, really, it's small, supplying water for fans. Now, I could be wrong. I think the Back Together event at Wofford had water stations for the fans because that was a huge event. But I don't recall easily accessible water inside of the practice area for fans, which that sounds stupid, but again, you're battling the heat. I know they've got concessions of sorts. It's not really food trucks, but concessions. Those small details like that, I think, make up for a lot of things. And then the view itself. Again, I love Spartanburg. I loved Wofford and what just the history, because that really was a history event. But there are some fantastic views. Being in Uptown Charlotte, the views that I've got to see from some of the clips and photos. I mean, we get to, we see the practice clips like outside of the season or off season. But I think for fans to be there in the practice facility where the Panthers practice, get to see that, it's cool. I was listening to Kyle Bailey. If y'all follow, listen to that, shout out to WFNZ as always. I was listening to him on the way home. He had Jake Delhomme on the show, and Jake Delhomme was kind of, they were asking about his experience with training camp and moving from Spartanburg to Charlotte this year, his thoughts. And he said, yeah, he kind of liked making that trek down to Spartanburg and being away, but he said that was the only thing he knew, his time in New Orleans and then coming here. Now, speaking of facilities and player personnel and where people are staying, what we learned today is if you are a veteran with 5 or more years of experience, you get to go home. But if you are under that threshold, you're staying in a hotel. And now I think the C3 podcast, the C3 Panthers podcast folks, I think I don't know the hotel, and I don't want to like bombard or have people bombarding this hotel. But I will say, I mean, I guess if you wanted to reach out to the folks at C3, at least a group of them that I could see, are staying in the same hotel as the Panthers players. I'm guessing somewhere in Uptown. I feel like that also is pretty convenient, comparing Spartanburg with, facilities and hotel wise. It's not a knock on Spartanburg, but I think, Uptown proximity to things probably a little bit easier because you could stay downtown. You could go to Panthers camp. You could go around, eat, dine, whatever you want to do as you're there. But I did see like they're out there tweeting this morning, some of those guys like, hey, yeah, just got on the elevator with Bryce. Just, saw Chuba Hubbard. So all the guys that are staying there, I think that's unique. And it is for me, I think going into camp with it being in Charlotte, a lot of us probably thought that the guys would get to go home. But it sounds like even though they are staying here, that they're keeping that same sort of mentality of, kind of the college edition of what they would have been experiencing at Wofford. So I think there's a lot of bonding that happens, man. I played football and I remember those camps, coming in, kicking off the season, whether it was high school, whether it was in college, those days when it's just you and the team and practice and film and team events for the first week or two, which, training camp's a little bit longer. We do bond, get close to each other during that time, probably hate each other by the end of it, at least partially, depending on how your lodging is and who you have to stay with. But it's a cool experience. So enough of the rambling around everything around training camp. Let's talk about training camp itself. Today we got to hear from Dave Canales, Jaycee Horn, and Xavier Legette. And there's quite a few tidbits. I can't go into every single detail of what was discussed at the pressers. I'd recommend either going back and watching it or going out and reading about what was discussed. There's a few things. The first though, really, and I guess taking a step back, I really didn't talk about what we heard yesterday. Excuse me, with like Dan Morgan. And I think that probably should be the tone setter because that was the tone setter for I think how we're going to view camp and how we're going to view this season for the Panthers. There's going to be a lot of talk between now going through training camp into the preseason on expectations for this year. And it feels like across the fan base, the expectations are lower. I don't want to say pretty low, but they're lower. And I think people are realizing that. And we got to hear from Dan. I don't know who asked the question about expectations for playoffs. Dan Morgan said he's not going to put that pressure on the team or the folks in the building right now. And I think that's a wise decision. And I know some people probably got upset that Dan Morgan didn't come out and say we want to be a playoff contender. I think in the back of our minds, of course, if things pan out and work the way that they should, or we overperform and you look better than we expect, like of course that's the thing. But I do think this is a rebuild, and nobody's ever going to come out and say, hey, we're in a rebuild mode or this is a rebuild time. But it does feel like that. Now I do think the Panthers should be taking next step forward. A lot of people clowning Bryce Young again on his size. It's like it's all that people can talk about right now, man. You see Bryce Young reporting for camp yesterday, and people talking about, oh, is he reporting to middle school football? Is he reporting to high school football? I mean, the jokes never stop. And I hope for his sake, I know he's never going to come out here and say, like, tell people to screw off. I hope for his sake that football wise this year, he really shuts up a lot of people. Because I get it. You can, doubt certain things and, have your own opinions of who he is, what he is, and all that. I just wanted to see him succeed. And I know he's been successful. And like I said, got to talk to Cassidy about what she saw in Trevor Lawrence and Bryce Young and, their experiences, what they went through. I do think that what Dave Canales is doing here in this first year is a lot of things are centered around the strengths of Bryce Young. And yeah, I'm not going to give away too much because I want y'all to watch the episode and learn a little bit more about what we've seen in the offseason and what Cassidy's seen firsthand. So I won't give too much away. But I think that was a good place to start when you're talking about expectations for this year. We also heard from Clowney yesterday talking through, he's never really, gone somewhere and lost, or that's not, part of his DNA. So I think it was good to hear from him. And then, of course, Bryce Young jumping right into things yesterday as we ramp up. Now, today, like I said, Got to hear from Dave Canales. Sounds like coming out of the gate, one of the big focal points of this offense is going to be Deontay Johnson. And I don't think that was, based off of what we saw in the blueprint, based off of what we've heard Deontay Johnson say throughout this offseason. And if you haven't been tuned into the offseason, which is fine because like I could see you shutting down, not wanting to know Panthers talk. But Deontay has talked about that, like when he came here, the conversations that have been had was that like Deontay is going to be the number one receiver. He's going to be the focal point of the offense, and getting the ball to him is a top priority. And we heard that emphasized again today with Dave Canales. So I think it's a good thing. I'm looking forward to chemistry between Bryce Young and Deontay Johnson to continue to develop into the season. And I think one of the things, Panthers fans, that we are really going to want to see coming into this year, and I think really in preseason play, is a productive offense that can score some points. Now, I'm not saying we got to go out and put up 20, 30 points in the preseason because I know there's going to be limited snap counts, limited availability of players. But we want to see a step forward because you go back to last year and you look at what happened in the preseason and how the offense just never looked good. And we were reassured that, hey, it's going to get better, it's going to get right. And it just never did. It never got there. So for me, I think a big measuring stick for how I'm gonna, lay down my final prediction on the season, because I'm gonna do it. I want to get through the preseason and I want to see how much better, if better, this offense is going in there. And I think the running attack, the rushing attack for this team, still going to be important. One of the highlights that I saw, I didn't see the highlight, I should say. Sounded like Bryce Young did pretty well today. I know the defense going up against Andy Dalton had a pick six, which is a big thing. Speaking of which, we got to hear from Jaycee Horn. It's funny to me. I tweeted this out. It's funny to me. One, we have all these Gamecocks, and if you're a Gamecocks fan in South Carolina or just a Gamecocks fan in general, you're probably pumped to have all these Gamecocks. If you're a Clemson fan, you're probably like, I don't know. I guess I'll pull for them since they're the pro team. But every Gamecock that's been up there, because we've had Clowney, we had Jaycee Horn, and now we had Xavier today. Everyone is asking them about traveling to Clemson and Death Valley for the practice. And I honestly can't remember if it was Jaycee or if it was Xavier that said they wish that the practice would have been in Columbia at South Carolina, and I don't blame them. But it's funny that we keep asking that. I mean, it's like, man, y'all know me. You can look back at the sign. I'm a Carolina fan and be like, oh, how do you feel about joint practice being held at Duke or NC State? Like, of course, I'm not going to be too fond of that. And these guys went and played there, but it's funny to hear that. But Jaycee Horn did talk about a little bit in the offseason program that he went through, a lot of things focused on nutrition, staying healthy. He was asked about one, a new contract, and he said he's here to show that he can be available and let things play out on the field, which I think, man, regardless of what's happened to Jaycee Horn over these last few years, if you're a Panthers fan, you want to see him be successful, because if he is, and if he can turn the corner on a lot of these injuries, there's a lot of upside on the defensive side of the ball for him and what he can do as a shutdown corner. Now, to give a little perspective, this really stuck out to me between listening to Jaycee and Xavier. So they talked a little bit, again, talking about the South Carolina ties. One, we got to hear about Xavier and the treadmill battle that happened with Debo over the summer. If you haven't had a chance, go out and watch that clip. I guess Xavier claiming that he won as they were doing that challenge that they were doing there. But there was conversation, and Jaycee Horn, I don't know the order. I believe Jaycee did go first today. I had to go back and watch these, so I didn't get to watch them live and know who was actually coming up. But I want to say Jaycee went first. And he was asked a little bit about, how was it going against Xavier? And it's funny to hear Jaycee's response versus Xavier. So Xavier gets to the stand, and I guess after, first thing he says is like he had a terrible practice. Like he just didn't practice well, really put himself like under a microscope And for me, just like taking a step back, like excluding that, like I love that we have our rookie wide receiver that is taking that level of accountability on himself to say, like, yeah, I had a terrible practice. I didn't do well. So you get this viewpoint from Xavier, and then you hear Jaycee and they, ask about covering Xavier and what that was like. And J.C. Horn talks about how difficult it was to cover Xavier. So here's Xavier saying, had a terrible day, things didn't go well. And you have J.C. Horn on the other side saying, man, it was hard to guard him. He's so strong. You've got to really be locked into him. The way that he gets in and out of routes, like, and you see the two different sides. So I think it's good, one, that these two are competing against each other in practice because I think it's going to elevate both games. But I think the fact that we have Xavier Legette putting himself under, again, this microscope, that he is holding himself to a high degree of accountability. And it's not to say that we haven't seen that and the guys aren't going to do that, but I think it really goes a long ways to setting the tone, changing the culture, and what that's going to mean for this team as they continue to grow and develop. Now, let me hop on over here to the chat. We don't have anything in the chat, man. Y'all are just tuned in watching, which is fine for me too. Again, you can watch on Facebook, you can watch on X, you can watch on YouTube. Prefer if y'all subscribe on YouTube, helps the show grow. But I think for me, that's going to probably do it for today. I hope, as we go through this again tonight, I got a new episode dropping with Keg. I'll have the episode with Cassidy coming out here in a few days. If you are a Panthers fan and you want to come on the show, best way to do that, you can leave a comment on YouTube if I'm not following you, or Facebook, and or you can reach out directly on X. I am kind of building up a lineup. I've gone through some really good folks so far with Mike K, Alex Zetlow, Joe Person, Cassidy Hill, Unnecessary Bluntness, Ricky Bobite, like the list goes on and on. Bunch of good folks. Anish Shroff, like so many people, it keeps growing. I've got another group that I'm working through now. Again, people close to the team will continue to build it, but I also am always open to having fans come on the show. Anyways, folks, I think that's going to do it. Oh, sorry. I'll catch up. I'll give one comment. Kind of high level overall impressions of today. I kind of just went through. I don't know, James. Thanks for tuning in, man. Not sure if you got to see the front or the beginning of the show. I kind of gave a high level overview. I'll say number one that we can take away right now, it doesn't sound like significant injuries, although I think I saw Popo, who is an undrafted free agent defensive lineman. I think he had an injury, which hopefully it's nothing big, but I'll say relatively speaking for the roster, no major injuries. From a lot of the highlights that I saw from other people that were there. Again, folks, I was not there today. I live in Wilmington, North Carolina. So I've got to work out the schedule to actually get there in Charlotte, 3 hours away. But a lot of positivity from, I'll say this, it's training camp, it's early. They're not in full pads yet. It's very limited. I don't think we're really going to know if this team is ready for that next step, the next chapter, whatever you want to say, until we get into the preseason. So I think the preseason, maybe the joint practice with the Jets is going to be a better indicator. I did hear, one thing I didn't talk about was that Eddie Pinheiro had a pretty good day today. I think he was 5 for 5, hit a 52-yarder. As you talk about kicking competition, Harrison Mevis did not kick. So I think the expectation is maybe we see Harrison Mevis tomorrow. But all that should pan out. But yeah, overall, sounds like a pretty good day from what everyone has said. So I think it should be a fun time. I will continue to keep y'all updated as I hear what's happening, and then I should be getting down to training camp, even if it's for a day or two in August, so that I can firsthand see what's happening down there. But guess what? I am gonna bring on folks that are at camp or are going to camp, so that we can hear what they are saying, what they're seeing, and bring that over to y'all as well, just so you can get some more knowledge and insight into everything that's happening in training camp. So I appreciate that. Yeah, man, Jets going to be a really big practice for the Panthers. We know last year how things went. Of course, there was HBO Hard Knocks for the Jets, and they said they dominated. And then they truly did dominate the preseason game. So I'll give them that. They manhandled us. I think it was like 26-0, if I recall. Was not close. Not a great start. Left your head scratching. We saw Bryce Young get sacked early, take a hit. So I'm hoping that round two this year. I think it's a good measuring stick for the offensive line and what they're going to look like. So should be good, a good test for us. But anyways, folks, think that will do it for me tonight. Again, I look for the new episode coming out or premiering. I think 8 Eastern. Another episode coming later. Of course, I'll continue to create content as we get on there. What's up, Marcus? I'm actually signing off, but thanks for tuning in, man. I appreciate that. And yes, as always, y'all keep pounding. I hope y'all have a good night, and we'll see y'all soon.